Hi, I'm Crystal Hurd, and welcome to my channel, That Lewis Lady. Happy Mother's Day to all the mothers. We're coming up on Mother's Day in the U.S., so happy Mother's Day to all the moms out there, especially my mom, Sandra. And I wanted to talk today about a specific mother, which is Flora Lewis, C.S. Lewis's mother. Now, most people only know mostly about Flora because her very awful death left C.S. Lewis very bereft as a child. He actually refers to it in Surprised by Joy as the sinking of Atlantis. It was a huge, huge blow to the young boy because he had spent a lot of time with his mom, especially when they went on trips to the seaside. And so he was very, very fond of his mother. And his mother was a great mother, taught them to play chess and worked with them in languages. She was a very hands-on mother, even though they did have some nurses in the house. So Flora has an amazing story that takes place long before her early exit that we've known so much about. So I wanted to talk for just a few minutes today and introduce some of you to this brilliant, brilliant woman. If you want some more information about Flora, I encourage you to get this book. This is Women and C.S. Lewis. I actually have chapter 1 in this book, which is about Flora, her brilliant life, her tragic death, and the lasting impact she had on her sons, but especially C.S. Lewis. This book is great. There are just tons of great contributors in here. And I would love for you guys to read more about it because Flora really was a remarkable woman. So she was born in 1862 in Cork. The family actually migrated, just like the Lewis family actually, to Belfast. Flora's father was Reverend Thomas Hamilton. He was an Anglican preacher, and he preached at St. Mark's, Dundela, which is a church in Belfast. So she grew up in an ecclesiastical, climate, but unfortunately she wasn't the most favored child. She was actually kind of ignored and neglected by her parents. So Flora just decided that she was going to be unique and different. So unlike many, many women of that time, Flora went off to college. She stayed in Belfast. She didn't go off too far, but she actually took day classes at the Methodist College, and then she did several plans of study at Royal University, which is now known as Queen's University in Belfast. So in 1881, she actually received a first in geometry and a first in algebra. And then she stayed there, took additional classes. In 1885, 4 years later, she actually earned a first in logic and a second in mathematics. That's actually the same year that Albert was becoming a solicitor and was doing his exams. So both of his parents, both of C.S. Lewis's parents, had a brilliant, brilliant early start to life. Now, one thing is Flora did actually like to write, and this is how she and Albert eventually became a couple. Now, Flora actually dated Albert's brother before she dated Albert, which made her very reluctant to get into another relationship with another Lewis boy. And I'll talk about that more in some of my research. But when she finally did give in, and it was over the works of John Ruskin that they both sort of loved and discussed and built a friendship and eventually a romance around that. But so many people don't realize that Flora was so brilliant on her own. Just because she wasn't the favorite child, she knew that she still had things to give and to contribute to the world. And so she was one of the first few females to attend college in Belfast and earn degrees. Now, I put that in air quotes because at the time, women were not awarded degrees. They were only allowed to attend the classes, take the exams, and be graded on those exams, but not receive the degree. Okay, but thankfully, Flora is listed in books as a pioneer of women's coeducational courses. She was one of the first, and her accomplishments helped eventually in the next few years to open women up to having degree programs given to them after their coursework, which is wild. So C.S. Lewis's mother was a pioneer of female education. It's awesome. She was such a great person. And if you are in Belfast, there's some great places you can go and visit. And the stained glass windows, for example, in St. Mark's, which were put in by Warren and C.S. Lewis after their father died in 1929. And those stained glass windows, I will link it down below, are on the church's website, and you can go see those. They were memorialized in those windows after their death. So she was not a traditional female by any stretch of the imagination. And she actually did write a little. She had a short story, which unfortunately we don't know where it's at. It's been lost to time, called The Princess Rosetta, that was published during her lifetime. And Albert was lucky enough to get a copy and read it and extolled Flora for being an amazing author. So let's take a look really quickly also at Flora as an individual. Now, Flora, we don't unfortunately have a whole lot about her in her youth. Those family papers weren't preserved all that much. We more have the Lewis side that was been preserved. However, we do have a few small things that Flora wrote in her youth that show us her humor and her wit and her intelligence. And let me read you an example of one of those. At the church where she attended, which was her father's church, there also a curate there, Mr. Palmer, and she actually wrote a sermon in the spirit of this curate, or perhaps her father, we're not sure which one, and it's Old Mother Hubbard. So she turned the Old Mother Hubbard verses into a sermon, satirizing a sermon. So this is a little bit of some of Flora's writing. Old Mother Hubbard, she went to the cupboard to get her poor dog a bone, but when she got there, the cupboard was bare, and so the poor dog got none. Mother Hubbard, you see, was old. There being no mention of others, we may presume she was alone, a widow, a friendless old solitary widow. Yet, did she despair? Did she sit down and weep, or read a novel, or wring her hands? No! She went to the cupboard. And here, observe, she went to the cupboard. She did not hop, or skip, or run, or jump, or use any other peripatetic artifice. She solely and merely went to the cupboard. We have seen that she was old and lonely, and we now see that she was poor. For mark the words, the cupboard, not one of the cupboards, or the right-hand cupboard, or the left-hand cupboard, or the one above, or the one below. Just the cupboard. The one humble little cupboard the poor widow possessed. And why did she go to the cupboard? Was it to bring forth golden goblets, or glittering precious stones, or costly apparel, or feast on any other attributes of wealth? It was to get her poor dog a bone. Not only was the widow poor, but the dog, the sole prop of her age, was poor too. We can imagine the scene. The poor dog, crouching in the corner, looking wistfully at the solitary cupboard, and the widow going to the cupboard in hope, in expectation. And it continues on, but that is part of what is included in Collected Letters 1. So you can see by this excerpt, she was hilarious. She was witty. She was funny. And we can see where C.S. Lewis gets so much of his wit. Now, both parents were very witty. They were a great match. And their marriage, although it was abbreviated by cancer, was one of love and respect, mutual respect and affection. They genuinely loved each other. Even though their relationship had a rocky start, when they married in 1894, They were blissfully happy. And Warren comes along in 1895, and then C.S. Lewis in 1898. So they had a very happy several years together as a family. And Flora often, took the boys to the shore. She wanted Albert to come, but Albert was very, very busy at his job. He was the type of guy who bit off way more than he could chew. And he had a lot of work. So, at this time, in some of the letters that we have in the family papers, Flora is starting to complain of migraine headaches. Quite often, she's beginning to get sicker more and more and more, and she has to take more naps, and she kind of has to lay down, and she has to sort of start delegating some of the care of the boys to some of the nurses, because she's, seems to be just feeling, malaise for many, many days. She still, though, was a great mother, took the kids out to play in the shore, to ride trains, and just explore the landscape. So even though she wasn't feeling good some days, she came out and she did the best she could for her boys while she was there. So eventually, let's forward a little to 1908. This was a rough year for the Lewis family. Albert lost a brother, a father, and a wife, all in about a 7-month time frame. It was devastating for him. And we talk a lot in Lewis studies about Albert's seemingly rather disconnected or apathetic sort of response to these things, but we must also understand that Albert was not only overworked, but he basically just buried the grief and tried to carry on, which is a very Victorian trait to do, and then realized later that he never really processed a lot of the emotions he had over losing his soulmate, and she was his soulmate. He never remarried, never dated as far as we knew. I haven't seen any of that in any of the papers or diaries or anything that we have in the family papers of Albert's business. So that was his wife, and he never really dated, never definitely married again. And always remembered, because Flora died on his birthday, his 45th birthday, always sort of looked to his birthday with a bittersweet sense, because she left him on that day. Now, in the few days, because she did get continually worse, in February of 1908, she had exploratory surgery on the dining room table at Little Lee, which is in Belfast, and that was when they found the cancer. And C.S. Lewis was present upstairs, as far as we know, when all of this was happening. Now, when they discovered the cancer, they went and did another surgery several months later, but at this point, the cancer was too advanced. So, in August of 1908, Flora was starting to die. Albert, who was ever the loving husband, sat by her bedside and recorded everything that she said and things that were happening, and kept them in a diary. And that's how we know that Flora's last words, because someone mentioned God, and Flora's last words were, "But what have we done for him?" Those were the last words that she uttered. But what have we done for him? And aside from that, she also knew, and she was getting sickly, that she wanted to gift her 2 boys with Bibles. So Albert's brother went out, bought 2 Bibles, and Flora signed them, one to each son. Unfortunately, we don't have C.S. Lewis's Bible, but we do have Warren's Bible, which is at the Marion E. Wade Center at Wheaton College. So we actually have that, and it's the only thing that I have seen with Flora's handwriting and signature. And she signs it from Mammy. So the last gift that she gave to her boys, quite appropriately, is God's Word. So it was it was a process that all of the Lewis men in the house had a devastating impact. They all three of them sort of mourned in their own way. Now I want to bring to your attention an excerpt out of Surprised by Joy, where C.S. Lewis was brought in to view his mother's body. Grief in childhood is complicated with many other mysteries. I was taken into the bedroom where my mother lay dead, as they said, to see her. In reality, as I once knew, to see it. There was nothing that a grown-up would call disfigurement except for that total disfigurement which is death itself. Grief was overwhelmed in terror. To this day, I do not know what they mean when they call dead bodies beautiful. The ugliest man alive is an angel compared with the loveliest of the dead. Against all the subsequent paraphernalia of coffin, flowers, hearse, and funeral, I reacted with horror. To my hatred for what I already felt to be all the fuss and flummery of the funeral, I may perhaps trace something in me which I now recognize as a defect, but which I have never fully overcome. A distaste for all that is public, all that belongs to the collective, a boorish inaptitude for formality. And really, all of that formality comes because that is the ritual. And C.S. Lewis didn't want to follow the ritual. As a young boy, he wanted to grieve. He didn't want to develop a stiff upper lip. He wanted to grieve his mother. And what a brilliant woman she was. A student far before many women. And in the 1880s, when a lot of these students were, especially female students, were being mocked openly in school publications, and some of the male students were actually pranking them in the classrooms. And she still persevered. And she still came out on top. And then now, this logic that she was so good at, her son inherits. And he becomes one of the most influential apologists of the 20th century. And it's a beautiful marriage. And even C.S. Lewis himself is sort of a beautiful marriage of logic, reason, imagination, passion. It's a yin and yang sort of. And he mentions this in Surprised by Joy, but he sort of is a perfect storm genetically of all these great traits, and embodies many of those, except for the math. He was not good at math. Flora had it, and C.S. Lewis did not get it. Although we do know that Flora actually attempted to tutor Warren in math when he was younger. So she was a brilliant woman, which was why she left such a huge yawning vacancy in the Lewis family. But her impact, her influence, her love, her wit, it still lives on in her sons. What a brilliant woman. And we're thankful for her inspiration. So again, happy Mother's Day to all the mothers. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. I love you guys, and I will see you soon. Bye.